Hello everyone, welcome to Coding 101. In this episode of Coding 101, we're talking prime numbers. So we are going to create a function that tells us whether or not a certain number is a prime number. So the definition of a prime number from the start, from the onset, is that a prime number is a number that can be divided by either 1 or itself. So this number can only be divided by 1 or itself. This is the definition that I got from high school. I hope it's the same throughout the world. So we're going to use that definition in order to create this function. We're going to check if there are any other numbers except for 1 and except for the number itself that can divide that particular number. So how we're going to do it is that we're going to loop through a couple of numbers that are less than that number or less than the half of that number. So if you have like a number like 10, we're going to loop from 2 to, let's say, 5. And the reason why we start from 2 and not 1 is because we already know that 1 can divide that number, so there's no need to check that. And so we start from 2 and we end at 5 if we're given a number like 10. And the reason why we go to 5 is because we know that any number after 5 cannot divide 10. So this is like a rule of mathematics, that any number after the half of that number cannot divide that particular number. So if you have a number like 20, any number after 10 cannot divide 20. If you have a number like 28, any number after 14 cannot divide 28. So it's like the rule of mathematics. That's why we start from 2 to the half of a number and we loop through and we iterate and we see if there's any number that can divide that particular number. So the reason why we're doing this is because we just don't want to take too much time, dividing, testing whether all the numbers from like 2 to that particular number can divide that number. So we just start from 2 to the half of a number to see whether or not that number is a prime number. So I'm going to be doing it a little differently this time. I'm just going to post the code. So we have the first if statement that says if n is equals to 0 and n is equals to 1, return false. And the reason why we return false is because we already know that 0 is not a prime number and 1 is not a prime number. We want to show that if the user either puts 0 or 1, then they know that those are not prime numbers. And this is where the magic happens right here. At the for loop, we iterate starting from 2 to the half of that number. To the half of that number, we should probably put an equal sign over here to include every number up to the half of that number. And we check, is there any number that can divide n? If there is any number that can divide n, that would essentially mean that the number is not a prime number, and so we return false. Any number that does not satisfy any of these conditions is a prime number. That's why we return true. It's pretty much the same thing in Python. So you just look at the code next door and you just do like the same thing. Create your function is primer, put your n, put your input, and then if n is equals to 0 or n is equals to 1, then what do? Return false. Make sure you capitalize the false in Python, and then you do the for loop now. If x in range, then where do you start? You start at 2, and where do we end? At 2. At n divided by 2. Make sure you put like a double slash, because if you put only one slash, you're gonna get a float instead of an integer. And make sure after this you just add 1 to include the half of the number that you're gonna put. And so how do you increment? You increment by 1 each time. And then you say if there is any number, put the modular sign, if there's any number which is x that can divide the number that we're doing, you return false. Keep forgetting to capitalize the false. Otherwise, return what? True. So this is gonna be fine. Let's check if we are correct. Put 13 over there. Put 23, put 111, and it says false, it's not a prime number. So you can like use so many numbers to check whether or not this is correct. So this is how you do this method in Python, and this is how you do it in Java. So please make sure you subscribe, make sure you leave a comment on the comment section. If there are any exercises that you want me to do, I would be happy to do them. So just leave your question on the comment section, I'd be happy to answer it. But also make sure you subscribe, and I will see you next time on Coding 101.